Why did absolutely no one prepare me for the mental exhaustion that is trying to feed yourself as an adult on a regular basis?
You're allowed to grieve the loss of something that you may not have ever actually had.
I can't help but feel like I'm living in the wrong place. And I think it's one of the worst feelings, knowing that there's so much more out there for you that you can't figure out how to get there.
No one talks about this kind of grief that I'm about to explain to you, okay? I'm not talking about the grief that comes from losing a loved one, or the grief that makes the news or gets you like sympathy cards and earns you a few days off work. I'm talking about a special kind of grief, okay? The quiet kind. I'm talking like the kind that creeps on you when you're like 35 years old and you realize that the life that you were told that you would have by now, like the house, the stability, the breathing room, the sense that your hard work meant something, isn't coming. Okay. It's not going to be delayed. It's not almost there. It's just not coming anymore. That's a very special kind of loss. Okay. And millions of Americans today are carrying it right now without a single word for what it actually is. It's truly grief. Okay. And it's truly okay to call it that, because think about what was really promised to us as Americans, not in writing, not in a contract, but in every message that we had absorbed growing up as kids. Work hard and you'll be okay. Get an education and doors will open for you. Play by the rules and life will literally reward you whatever you dream of, right? Save up and one day you'll own something, you'll build something. You'll have something to show for all of the hard work that you have done. That promise was the foundation. It was the reason that you did the hard things, okay? It was the reason that you took out the loans and worked the jobs that you didn't love, but you did to put off the things that you wanted to, just to try to build towards something. And at some point, for millions of Americans out here, the building stopped paying off for us, okay? The foundation literally fell apart, and what we were left with wasn't the life that we were promised, honestly. It was a much smaller, much harder, much more precarious version of it. And no one told you how to grieve that. Here's what that grief actually looks like day to day for the average person. It looks like you're driving by neighborhoods that you used to assume that you live in someday and feeling something that you can't quite name. It looks like watching your parents' generation talk about buying their first house in their 20s and feeling a kind of distance from that reality that doesn't really have a word. It also looks like the moment that you do the math on home ownership and you realize that it's not going to happen. Not in this decade, maybe not ever, honestly. And the way that calculation sits in your chest for days afterward can really eat you up inside. That's truly grief out here, guys. Every single one of those is a loss. And we have built a culture that doesn't give people permission to mourn these kind of losses. But instead, we were told to be grateful, right? And I understand that, I truly do. Gratitude does matter, of course. And, there are real blessings in a hard life for sure. But gratitude and grief are not opposites, okay? I think you could be grateful for what you have, but still mourn what was taken from you. You can appreciate your life and still feel the weight of the gap between what you were promised and what you actually got. I think two things could coexist. Telling someone to just be grateful when they're grieving a lost future is like telling someone not to cry at a funeral because at least they had good years together. Like it really misses the point completely. The grief is real, like the loss is real, and the version of life that was described to you that you oriented your entire young adulthood around didn't materialize, and that is something worth acknowledging instead of just suppressing. And I want to say something that this culture almost never really says anymore. You are truly allowed to mourn the life that you didn't get. You are allowed to feel the loss of the future that was decided to you and it didn't arrive. You are allowed to be sad about the house that you don't own and the stability that you haven't found and the version of yourself that you thought you'd be at by now. You are allowed to grieve all of that without anyone telling you to look on the bright side, Because acknowledging the loss isn't the same as giving up, okay? Naming the grief isn't the same as letting it win over you. Sometimes the most honest and necessary thing you can really do as an adult in today's time is to look at the gap between what you were promised and what you got and say, right? Like that's the real loss that you are allowed to feel. And Americans are truly grieving a life that they were promised but they never got. And at least the least that we could do is finally give that grief a name that it deserves.
Serious question, but is anybody else scared about how fast time is going? Like, I'm at work and I'm like having a panic attack because I'm 24 and I don't want time to go by, and like it's just so scary how time passes by so fast. Like 2020 was 6 years ago and I can't believe it, and I'm just so emotional. I'm so sad.
Of being a fucking adult, I feel like shit and I have to go to fucking work. I don't want to go to work. My throat hurts, my body hurts, my head hurts. I don't want to go to work. I just want to lay in my fucking bed. But I have to go to work. Oh my god. Oh my goodness.
Why did absolutely no one prepare me for the mental exhaustion that is trying to feed yourself as an adult on a regular basis? You're telling me that I not only have to decide what I want to eat every single meal for every single day, I have to then make sure that I have the groceries in the house. And if I don't have those groceries in the house, then I have to go to the grocery store, get all the items I need, come back home, cook for myself, and then clean it up and eat. And I have to do that every single day for the rest of my life? I'm gonna lose my mind.
I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but have you ever had to grieve a situation or a person or idea that you thought was going to be something and turn out to not be that thing? And you spend so much time going through your mind grieving what could have been. I've learned, and I believe that sometimes the grief of what could have been is sometimes harder to process more than the grief of what was. Because the grief of what could have been is sometimes rooted in like, it's a fantasy in your mind. It's this idea of what it could have been. And that has its own possibilities in itself. And oftentimes when the grief of what was comes, that hurts too. And I'm not discrediting that, but sometimes the grief of what could have been hurts way more than what once actually was. So
You're allowed to grieve the loss of something that you may not have ever actually had. And I know that sounds weird, but it's true. When there is something in the future that we're longing for, whether it is a relationship or health or living in a certain place or something major that we set our hearts very heavily on, and then we lose the possibility of it happening, it's normal for that to be upsetting. And it's just as normal for people to be like, I don't know why this is so upsetting. It's not like I ever had it to begin with, so what did I even lose here? And what we lost is a potential future. And the thing about our potential futures, particularly the ones that we get very set on, is that in our minds, they become a reality. And when something becomes a reality in our mind, it doesn't really matter whether it's tangibly real or not, we become attached to it. Which is why when we lose those things, we feel it so heavily. And that's okay. And that's why it's important to allow yourself to actually feel those things, to allow yourself to grieve them and to not feel silly about it. Because losing a potential future is just as real as losing something that you tangibly have. And it's just as important to allow yourself to grieve that in order to accept it and come to terms with it and move on.
In a way, when things are like super chaotic and then you get to a point where you look back and you kind of start grieving the way life you thought it would be, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't expect things to be like this. I didn't know things would be like this. And I didn't think I would be like this or end up like this. And you just start to feel like the weight of everything just crushing on your shoulders, or you just feel it in your chest at this point. Like, what did I do? How did I get here? And is there any way for me to really get out of my situation? I know I get like a lot of people giving me such like great advice when it comes to getting out of my situation, and I'm grateful for that. But it's like you still can't get over the fact of, I can't believe I got here, and this wasn't supposed to be my life, it feels like. Or like, is this supposed to be my life?
I can't help but feel like I'm living in the wrong place. And I think it's one of the worst feelings, knowing that there's so much more out there for you that you can't figure out how to get there. I had something taken away from me that was really important, and it took away not only my future, but my stability and all my future goals. And it took away, I guess, a dream that was literally dangling right in front of me. I envisioned this life for myself. It's just all went down the drain. I just feel stuck. And I honestly have no idea what to do. The reason why I'm making this video is because I really hope I can look back on it one day and just hope for a miracle and that everything ends up working out. But I'm finding it hard to keep faith in that because every single avenue I try to explore is just like a dead end. You can only be patient for so long, you know?
An ambiguous grief is realizing that you're never going to have something that you always thought you would have or wanted to have. In other words, you had sort of maybe this vision or this idea of what life would look like in the future for you. And at some point in your life, you realize that thing is never going to happen for you. And when that moment comes, when you realize that, it feels like the ghost of the deepest, darkest sadness you've ever felt in your life comes up behind you and punches your soul right in the groin. That's what ambiguous grief feels like. And most people won't even acknowledge it. In fact, you might not even tell anyone about it because you don't know what to call it, or at least you didn't until today. The world does not recognize ambiguous grief. The world does not generally consider realizing you're never going to have something that you didn't have in the first place to even be a significant loss worth identifying. But it basically feels like you are grieving the loss of an alternate universe version of yourself that is never going to be allowed to exist. It's never going to come to fruition.
I don't think this is talked about enough about grieving the life that you thought you would have had by the time you got to the age that you are now. And I couldn't have imagined this would be my life. You know, I got married at 23 and I thought that was it. I thought that that was my happily ever after, only to get to the age of 45. And here I am getting to know myself as a single woman, a mom of two, and realizing a lot of who I wasn't authentic to who I am. And so I showed up a certain kind of way. And in many ways, you know, I would say, oh, I lost myself in marriage and I lost myself in motherhood. But honestly, I never knew myself. And so here I am at 45 getting to know me for the first time. And I am grieving the version of me that thought life was going to look different. I thought that I made the right choices. I thought that I was doing the right thing, only to wake up in 2020 and realize, wait a minute, this is not it. And so there's beauty in where I'm at now, but there's also grief in the life that I thought that I was going to have at this age. And so I say that to say I overstand. And there are so many women that can relate to grieving the life that they would have or thought that they would live at this point. And it's okay. I think we need to embrace the grief, right? And then be open to where we're at now and envision a new life for ourselves, a life that is true and beautiful and that feels good from the inside out. And so thank you so much for sharing. And I would love to know in the comments who can relate. Go ahead and repost this, like this, and save it because I know you're going to need to come back.
I tried. You know, if I'm meant to be homeless, broke, Paul, that what it is. Like, I'm not stressing myself out. I'm gonna keep trying my best, and if I'm meant to be broker than broke, well, at least I tried. Shit. I stopped stressing myself out months ago. Just kind of let life happen. It always works out. But it's like, if it works out that I end up broke, poor, and lonely and homeless, well, I tried.
I figured I'd try the cinematic filter where everything around me is blurry. Does that make me look more professional or something? Anyway, my life hasn't turned out the way I planned, and it's depressing because my 35th birthday is coming up in September, and I'll be 35, and my band still is not like successful to where we're making any kind of money to pay bills with. And music has been, that was the whole goal from when I was 18 years old. I thought by the time I was this age, I would have already been on like my second or third world tour. And we're still what feels like a glorified local band, though we do play out of town, but we've yet to go on like an actual tour. You know, some of my bandmates are older than me, you know, and it's like, it just sucks, dude, because it's like, it didn't happen for you, you know? The thing that you wanted didn't happen. The way, the life that you planned is not a reality for you. So then what? Do you just like accept like less? You accept like, okay, I'm just gonna settle for like this lesser thing. Is that like the key to happiness, is to just accept whatever you have and just be happy with that? And not ever, like, you're not allowed to feel like this is bullshit. Like I put in so much work. I've listened to so many autobiographies about musicians and how they're coming up and when they hit their big break, and it sounds just like my story. Like I spent all that time in my room as a kid learning my instrument. I did, you know, like learned how to write songs. Like I joined bands and then quit and then joined other bands. And just, there was some point for me where apparently something was going to happen and it just didn't happen. You know, also like the more loftier your goals and dreams are in life, the more likely you're going to be disappointed. I found this to be true. Because then I thought about, I was like, well, whose life turned out the way they planned it? And I was like, my mom's kind of did. But her only plan was to be a mom. She wanted to have kids and raise a family, and she did that. And so she seems like a very peace-filled person. So I guess if you, but again, that's not a very lofty goal. Anyone can go out and pop out a kid, you know. But if you want to be a rock star, if you want to be an actor, if you want to be a famous stand-up comedian, then there's a lot bigger room for disappointment. How do you get over it? How do you deal with it? You know, do you just accept the fact that it didn't work out, or what do you do? That's what I'm struggling with lately.